Welcome to another tutorial brought to you by the HydroCode channel. So I haven't made a tutorial in a while, but this is the next step, I guess. So I'm going to be remaking the MVC framework series. It wasn't much of a series, 2 parts. And I'm making it a little more practical. It's going to be a little more intuitive and simpler, I guess. Not in the simpler as in basic, less functionality, but as in everything is just dumbed down to what is necessary and not overly complex or complicated for nothing. So we're going to be working with that, and I'm also going to be incorporating a lot of 5.3 PHP 5.3 features. So make sure you have a PHP version above 5.3, if not 5.4, since I'm going to be going into some 5.4 features. Not right now, obviously, but in the maybe in a few tutorials where it needs to be, where we think we could implement some of those nice new features. So that said, we're also going to be using namespaces heavily, and that is in 5.3. We're going to be working with class aliases, packages, and a whole bunch of other stuff. So let me break it down inside the Explorer here. If you go to your web root, not that one. Computer WAMP. Okay, so for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to call this MVC. So create a new folder and just call it whatever you want. And this is going to be where your project is in. So there's 2 folders that we need to create in here. A folder called public and another one called packages. So I guess the point of this whole kind of MVC framework is to get a kind of different approach upon the other ones that are provided, such as the community or enterprise grade frameworks. And they concentrate more on, I would call it overly complicating things at times, when you can just dumb it down extremely, so it's a lot easier to work with. And some frameworks just include way too much overhead. I don't know anything about, or I know some things about, but I haven't tested it out for myself. Zend and Symfony 2, but I heard Zend isn't too bad, since you can customize it quite a bit. But Symfony 2 is fairly large in its overhead. For the page requests, just a brand new install, they compared the different community frameworks and enterprise frameworks, more community, and they went head to head. And I don't know, Symfony 2 kind of had bottlenecks here and there. So, and it wasn't the only one. There was a few other ones, and they tested it out not just with PHP frameworks, but also with Python and Ruby on Rails, and Sinatra. So, but I guess Sinatra is an extremely lightweight framework, which might be more what we're gonna go ahead and compare to. So everything, the whole core, the whole MVC components, everything is going to be inside the packages. Everything in the public. So typically in a web hosting environment, usually if you're not using the kind of new technologies with JIT and stuff, then you would FTP into your web root, and you have a folder called public_HTML, and everything inside there would be accessible through your domain name or IP address of the server. But the problem is if, let's say, all your files that contain all the core, all the passwords, not necessarily the passwords, but just the whole framework, are accessible, or are technically accessible, right? And let's say you forgot to lock some files up, or just something happened and someone was able to access it and download it, and kind of, it's kind of one of those security concerns. Might not happen, probably won't, but it's still good to assure yourself. So with that said, the public, imagine that as the public underscore HTML. So anything inside here would actually go inside your public HTML, and then this packages folder would go just outside of it. So it would not be accessible to the web, but your framework would work just fine with it being like that. And you have just a little more cleanness, and just kind of a nicer environment, I guess. Safer if you're going that way. So inside the public, this is where we're gonna have our assets, and we're also gonna have a text document called index.php. You can just create that right there. So inside of packages, we're gonna create a few of them right here. Okay, we're gonna create an app package, and we're gonna create a pulse package. Pulse mainly because that's my name for my personal framework that I've been working on for a little bit. And if this is Pulse, you can replicate, or you can rename this to whatever system folder or core folder you want. This is where all the core functionality will come into, and it's extremely versatile and extendable if you put it this way, since the core is full of its classes. There's gonna be like one or two files that are not object oriented and that don't have any classes in them, and those are just the bootstraps. Everything else is a class, meaning it can be extended, it can be implemented, it can be abstracted, and all that fun stuff. So that means that you can create, and it's kind of really nice to be able to, let's say you have a kind of a notification, kind of ideal, or not ideal, but you need functionality for real-time notifications, or as close as real-time as you can get, right? So instead of creating a controller, or since you want to be able to access it everywhere, and since there's no libraries or plugins, quote unquote, in this particular framework, it's instead being called as packages, and it's kind of interpreted differently. And a package is not routed through the URL, so or everything but the app. In the app, you'll have all your MVC components, and all of those things will be routed from the URL, but any other package cannot be accessed through the address bar. So that means that your controllers can call your packages, and you can kind of have like a compiled kind of environment for each package. So let's say you create a package called notifications, or let's just say notification, and inside here you would have your config. So each package can contain a separate MVC components. Essentially, you can have your classes, and I'll explain that in a second, your views, your language files, so lang, and there's some other ones I'm missing, but in classes you would have then your controllers, your model. It's can be singular, and your view model. And if you don't know what the view model is, it's kind of a mid between a model and a view. It's instead of parsing, or not parsing, but formatting. If you have a lot of heavy formatting that needs to be in the view, since, well, it does not belong in the controller, formatting does, it does belong in the view, but it just makes the view kind of more logic in a sense than just presentation. So what you can do is you can have a view model, which is essentially just like it's a class, and what that does is you can use that to format independently your data and send it off properly instead of doing that all inside the view. So it's kind of a helper, more or less. You don't have to use it, but it's there if you need it. So in here, so that's how the notifications, I guess, work. But in here, in classes, you don't have to have this MVC grid or pattern. You can just have just files, and let's say you create a some file here .php, and you can just load this file, and you can have a huge ton of a list of files. You can have your own custom folders. You kind of create. There's gonna be some helpers to work specifically with the MVC components, but if you don't want to, then that's perfectly fine. Kind of having that, taking away that limitation and adding extra bonuses involved. So those are packages. If you're familiar to Fuel PHP framework that I kind of just started using, there's a lot of good ideas in that framework, and I think in 2.0 they're putting everything into packages, and so I was like, that's a fairly good idea, and I really like the outcome of it. It's very nice and clean. So we're gonna get started here. Let's see. We're gonna open up our index with a text editor. You can use whatever text editor you want. I'm using Sublime Text 2. If you're it's still in beta, but it's one of my favorite text editors. So we're gonna go ahead and open up our PHP tags, except don't close the PHP tags. It's kind of yeah, there's sometimes cases where there's white space and other errors that can occur, and plus it's not essential if it's just a PHP file. So we'll get started here. We're gonna have to define a few constants, and I'll just shorten that right there. And then we're gonna go, and if the base path is defined, then leave it, or define the base path, and then we're going to get into right here the directory name of the real path of the current file, and append a slash, a backslash, and then dot dot, and then a backslash in quotes. You can probably read this right here. And this essentially means, since this is in the public, we want the base path to be just outside of the public. So that's what this thing does. So the underscore file is where this current file is, so that contains that data. And so we want to get the real path of that, meaning the file system path, not the HTTP kind of web address. And then we want to get the directory name of where that file is. and not the file itself. So that's the base path. And right here, let's see if this, there we go. That's what I wanted to do. So that's going to be the base path. And then we defined a package path, or define. And this is going to be the base path, and then packages. And always append a backslash at the end of these, since it's easier to work with. And defined, we'll need a core path, or define core path, and this is going to be the base path, or actually this is going to be the package path, and I think we call it pulse. So I'm just going to go and make this nice and pretty. So let's define our app path. Oh, defined. Or define our app path to be your package path, and then app. So you can actually change these naming conventions, I guess, to whatever you feel like it, and someone else that comes and uses your framework, or someone that's helping you with the project, they can always tweak it, and they can get rid of the app and just create their own app kind of structure, and just change a few things in this file right here. So I believe that's all we need for the constants here. So what we need is an if statement right here. So if a function doesn't exist of what should we call it? I'm just going to call it bootstrap underscore autoloader. And so if that function does not exist, then we can define that function. So function bootstrap autoloader. Main reason why I'm putting all these if it's defined, then leave it, otherwise define it, and if the function doesn't exist, it's because once we get into the command line interface, I'll be showing you guys how to do that, how to create kind of a tool to go along with your framework. And it's pretty much like using your framework online. It'll access all the same files, but instead of accessing this file first, it'll access a different file, and yeah, so it'll access that file, and it'll set its specific kind of parameters, and then it'll go in and include this file to run everything again. So that's why we do this type of setup right here. So what we need is we need to require the autoloader file. So if we require the core path, and yeah, that's fine, and then slash, or we want the classes folder inside the core path. I'll explain that in a bit. And then we want the autoloader.php, and we'll be making that file shortly. And what we want to do is we want to define this autoloader. So I'm going to pause, or I'm going to stop this video right here, upload it, and I'll continue from the next video, and we'll expand on this quite a bit. So I'll talk to you guys later.